Hello, Squirrel Squad listeners. I was checking to see if my lights were on. Looks a little dark. Sorry about not getting a reading again yesterday. Some days just go by and I don't get to it. Nothing but pure laziness. I'm sorry. Something in her frank tone, her confiding look, seemed to please Warwick. He sat a moment looking into the brown depths of the water and let the boat drift, with no sound but the musical drip of drops from the oars. "You're going upon a rock, sir. I did that 3 months ago." He spoke as if to himself. His face darkened and he shook the hair off his forehead with an impatient gesture. A swift stroke averted the shock, and the boat shot down the stream, leaving a track of foam behind it as Warwick rowed with the energy of one bent on outstripping some importunate remembrance or dogging care. Sylvia marveled greatly at the change which came upon him, but held fast with flying hair and lips apart to catch the spray, enjoying the breezy flight along a path tessellated with broad bars of blue and gold. The race ended as abruptly as it began, and Warwick seemed the winner, for when they touched the coast of a floating lily island, the cloud was gone. As he shipped his oars, he turned, saying with very much the look and manner of a pleasant boy, "You were asleep when we passed this morning, but I know you will like lilies, so let us go a-fishing." "That I do," cried Sylvia, capturing a great white flower with a clutch that nearly took her overboard. Warwick drew her back and did the gathering himself. "Enough, sir, quite enough. Here are plenty to trim our table and ourselves with. Leave the rest for other voyagers who may come this way." As Warwick offered her the dripping nosegay, he looked at the white hand scored with scarlet lines. "Poor hand, let the lilies comfort it. You are a true woman, Miss Sylvia, for though your palm is purple, there's not a stain upon your lips, and you have neither worked nor suffered for yourself, it seems." "I don't deserve that compliment, because I was only intent on outdoing you if possible, so you are mistaken again, you see." "Not entirely, I think. Some faces are so true an index of character that one cannot be mistaken. If you doubt this, look down into the river, and such a one will inevitably smile back at you." Pleased yet somewhat abashed, Sylvia busied herself in knotting up the long brown stems, and tinging her nose with yellow pollen as she inhaled the bittersweet breath of the lilies. But when Warwick turned to resume the oars, she said, "Let us float out as we floated in. It is so still and lovely here. I like to stay and enjoy it, for we may never see such a scene again." He obeyed, and both sat silent, watching the meadows that lay green and low along the shore, feeding their eyes with the beauty of the landscape till its peaceful spirit seemed to pass into her own and lend a subtle charm to that hour, which henceforth was to stand apart, serene and happy in their memories forever. A still August day, with a shimmer in the air that veiled the distant hills with the mellow haze no artist ever truly caught. Midsummer warmth and ripeness brooded in the verdure of field and forest. Wafts of fragrance went wandering by from new-mown meadows and gardens full of bloom. All the sky wore its serenest blue, and up the river came frolic winds, ruffling the lily leaves until they showed their purple linings, sweeping shadowy ripples through the long grass, and lifting the locks from Sylvia's forehead with a grateful touch. As she sat softly swaying with the swaying of the boat, Slowly they drifted out into the current. Slowly Warwick cleft the water with reluctant stroke, and slowly Sylvia's mind woke from its trance of dreamy delight, as with a gesture of assent she said, "Yes, I'm ready now. That was a happy little moment, and I'm glad to have lived it, for such times return to refresh me when many a more stirring one is quite forgotten." A moment after, she added eagerly as a new object of interest appeared, "Mr. Warwick, I see smoke. I know there is a wood on fire. I want to see it, please. Please land again." He glanced over his shoulder at the black cloud trailing away before the wind, saw Sylvia's desire in her face, and silently complied. For being a keen student of character, he was willing to prolong an interview that gave him glimpses of a nature in which the woman and the child were curiously blended. "I love fire, and that must be a grand one if we could only see it well. This bank is not high enough. Let us go nearer and enjoy it," said Sylvia, finding that an orchard and a knoll or two intercepted the view of the burning wood. "It's too far." "Not at all. I am no helpless fine lady. I can walk, run, and climb like any boy. So you need have no fears for me. I may never see such a sight again. And you know you'd go if you were alone. Please come, Mr. Warwick. I promised Mark to take care of you for the very reason that you love fire. I'd rather not take you into that furnace, lest you never come out again. Let us go back immediately." The decision of his tone ruffled Sylvia, and she turned wilful at once, saying in a tone as decided as his own, "No, I wish to see it. I am always allowed to do what I wish, so I shall go." And with which mutinous remark she walked straight away towards the burning wood. Warwick looked after her, indulging a momentary desire to carry her back to the boat like a naughty child, but the resolute aspect of the figure going on before him convinced him that the attempt would be a failure, and with an amused expression he leisurely followed her. Weird. About fire. Sylvia had not walked 5 minutes before she was satisfied that it was too far, but having rebelled, she would not own herself in the wrong, and being perverse, insisted upon carrying her point, though she walked all night. On she went over walls, under rails, across brooks, along the furrows of more than one plowed field, and in among the rustling corn that turned its broad leaves to the sun, always in advance of her companion, who followed with exemplary submission, but also with a satirical smile that spurred her on as no other demonstration could have done. 6 o'clock sounded from the church behind the hill. Still the wood seemed to recede as she pursued. Still close behind her came the steady footfalls with no sound of weariness in them. And still Sylvia kept on, till breathless but successful she reached the object of her search. Keeping to the windward of the smoke, she gained a rocky spot, still warm and blackened by the late passage of the flames, and pausing there, forgot her own pranks in watching those which the fire played before her eyes. Many acres were burning. The air was full of the rush and roar of the victorious element, the crash of trees that fell before it, and the shouts of men who fought it unavailingly. "Ah, this is grand. I wish Mark and Mr. Moore were here. Aren't you glad you came, sir?" Sylvia glanced up at her companion as he stood regarding the scene with an intent and alert expression one often sees in a fine hound when he scents danger in the air. But Warwick did not answer, for as she spoke, a long, sharp cry of human suffering rose above the tumult, terribly distinct and full of ominous suggestion. "Someone was killed when that tree fell. Stay here till I come back." And Adam strode away into the wood as if his place were where the peril lay. For 10 minutes Sylvia waited, pale and anxious. Then her patience gave out, and saying to herself, "I can go where he does, and women are always more helpful than men at such times," she followed in the direction whence came the fitful sound of voices. The ground was hot underneath her feet. Red eyes winked at her from the blackened sod, and fiery tongues darted up here and there, as if flames were lurking still, ready for another outbreak. Intent upon her charitable errand and excited by the novel scene, she pushed recklessly on, leaping charred logs, skirting still burning stumps, and peering eagerly into the dun veil that wavered to and fro. The appearance of an impassable ditch obliged her to halt, and pausing to take breath, she became aware that she had lost her way. The echo of voices had ceased. A red glare was deepening in front, and clouds of smoke enveloped her in a stifling atmosphere. A sense of bewilderment crept over her. She knew not where she was, and after a rapid flight in what she believed a safe direction, had been cut short by the falling of a blazing tree before her. She stood still, talking counsel with herself. Darkness and danger seemed to encompass her. Fire flickered on every side, and suffocating vapors shrouded earth and sky. A bare rock suggested one hope of safety, and muffling her head in her skirt, she lay down faint and blind, with a dull pain in her temples and a fear at her heart fast deepening into terror. As her breath grew painful and her head began to swim, "This is the last of the pleasant voyage. Oh, why does no one think of me?" As the regret rose, a cry of suffering and entreaty broke from her. She had not called for help till now, thinking herself too remote, her voice too feeble to overpower the din about her. But someone had thought of her, for as the cry left her lips, steps came crashing through the wood. A pair of strong arms caught her up, and before she could collect her scattered senses, she was set down beyond all danger on the green bank of a little pool. "Well, salamander, have you had fire enough?" asked Warwick, as he dashed a handful of water in her face with such energetic goodwill that it took her breath away. "Yes, oh yes, and of water too. Please stop and let me get my breath," gasped Sylvia, warding off a second baptism and staring dizzily about her. "Why did you quit the place where I left you?" was the next question, somewhat sternly put. "I wanted to know what had happened." "So you walked into a bonfire to satisfy your curiosity, though you had been told to keep out of it. You'd never make a Casa Bianca." "I hope not. For all silly children, that boy was the silliest, and he deserved to be blown up for his want of common sense," cried the girl petulantly. "Obedience is an old-fashioned virtue which you would do well to cultivate along with your common sense, young lady." Sylvia changed the subject, for Warwick stood regarding her with an irate expression that was somewhat alarming. Fanning herself with the wet hat, she asked abruptly, "Was the man hurt, sir?" "Yes." "Very much?" "Yes." "Can I not do something for him? He is very far from any house, and I have some experience in wounds." "He is past all help, above all want now." "Dead, Mr. Warwick?" "Quite dead." Sylvia sat down as suddenly as she had risen, and covered her face with a shiver, remembering that her own wilfulness had tempted a like fate, and she too might now have been past help, above all want. Warwick went down to the pool to bathe his hot face and blackened hands. As he returned, Sylvia met him with a submissive, "I will go back now, if you are ready, sir." If the way had seemed long in coming, it was doubly so in returning, for neither pride nor perversity sustained her now, and every step cost an effort. "I can rest in the boat," was her sustaining thought. Great, therefore, was her dismay when on reaching the river no boat was to be seen. "Why, Mr. Warwick, where is it?" "A long way down the river by this time, probably. Believing that we landed only for a moment, I did not fasten it, and the tide has carried it away." "What shall we do?" "One of two things. Spend the night here, or go round by the bridge." "Is it far?" "Some 3 or 4 miles, I think." "Is there no shorter way, no boat or carriage to be had?" "If you care to wait, I can look for our runaway, or get a wagon from the town." "It's growing late, and you would be gone a long time, I suppose." "Probably." "Which had we better do?" "I should not venture to advise. Suit yourself. I will obey orders." "If you were alone, what would you do?" "Swim across." Sylvia looked disturbed. Warwick impenetrable, the river wide, the road long, and the cliffs the most inaccessible of places. An impressive pause ensued, and then she said frankly, "It's my own fault, and I'll take the consequences. I choose the bridge and leave you the river. If I don't appear till dawn, tell Mark I sent him a good night." And girding up her energy, she walked bravely off with much external composure, with an internal chagrin. As before, Warwick followed in silence. For a time she kept in advance and allowed him to gain upon her, and presently fell behind, plodding doggedly on through thick and thin, vainly trying to conceal the hunger and fatigue that were fast robbing her of both strength and spirits. Adam watched her with a masculine sense of the justice of the retribution which his wilful comrade had brought upon herself. But as he saw the elasticity leave her steps, the color fade from her cheeks, the resolute mouth relax, and the wistful eyes dim once or twice, with tears of weariness and vexation, pity got the better of pique, and he relented. His steady tramp came to a halt, and stopping by a wayside spring, he pointed to a mossy stone, saying with no hint of superior powers, "We are tired, let us rest." Sylvia dropped down at once, and for a few minutes neither spoke, for the air was full of sounds, more pertinent to the summer night than human voices. From the copse behind them came the coo of wood pigeons, from the grass at their feet the plaintive chirp of crickets. A busy breeze whispered through the willow, the little spring dripped musically from the rock, and across the meadows came the sweet chime of a bell. Twilight was creeping over forest, hill, and stream, and seemed to drop refreshment and repose upon all weariness of soul and body, more grateful to Sylvia than the welcome seat and leafy cup of water Warwick brought her from the spring. The appearance of a thirsty sparrow gave her thoughts at a pleasant turn, for sitting motionless she watched the little creature hop down to the pool, drink and bathe, then flying to a willow spray, dress its feathers, dry its wings, and sit chirping softly as if it sang its evening hymn. Warwick saw her interest, and searching in his pocket found the relics of a biscuit, strode a few bits upon the ground before him, and began a low sweet whistle which rose gradually to a varied strain, alluring, spirited, and clear as any bird voice of the wood. Little sparrows ceased his twitter, listened with outstretched neck and eager eye, hopping restlessly from twig to twig until he hung just over the musician's head, agitated with a small flutter of surprise, delight, and doubt. Gathering a crumb or two into his hand, Warwick held it toward the bird, while softer, sweeter, and more urgent rose the invitation, and nearer drew the winged guest, fascinated by the spell. Suddenly a belated blackbird lit upon the wall, surveyed the group, and burst into the jubilant song that for a moment drowned his rival's notes. Then, as if claiming the reward, he fluttered to the grass, ate his fill, took a sip from the mossy basin by the way, and flew ringing over the river, leaving a trail of music behind him. There was a dash and daring about this which fired little Sparrow with emulation. His last fear seemed conquered, and he flew confidently to Warwick's palm, pecking the crumbs with grateful chirps and friendly glances from its quick, bright eye. Whew! Let's see if I stop right here, maybe. Let me see how much there is to go. 1, 2, 3. Not a whole lot, but I am give out. So I'm going to stop right there. And I hope y'all have a happy, crafty day, and I hope to see you in the YouTube streets. I will be, hopefully, at Dana's Creatively Created Crochet, her making meet at 5:30. Love you bunches. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye.